Mike Davis with some bombshell Supreme Court news, in particular the Chevron decision and also the January 6th decision. Mike Davis, welcome to the program. Mike, tell us about those two amazing bombshell decisions today.
Yeah, the Chevron case is monumental. The Supreme Court reversed a 40-year-old precedent where courts and the Supreme Court instructed the lower courts to simply defer to unelected bureaucrats in these executive branch agencies when they interpret statutes dealing with their own power. So, of course, these unelected bureaucrats, the Tony Fauci's of the world, interpreted these statutes to give them more power. And it created this problem where not only does the federal government have too much power that it doesn't have under the U.S. Constitution, then that power was consolidated in the executive branch, legislative power that Congress is supposed to have, judicial power that the Supreme Court and lower federal courts are supposed to have. And then they made it even more unaccountable in the executive branch by saying these executive branch bureaucrats were not removable by the President of the United States and unaccountable to the American people. So the Chevron decision is very, very important because it says that Congress must do its job and legislate, and courts must do its job and interpret laws, and we don't just defer to these executive branch agencies. Another big case that came out today was the Fischer case, and the Fischer case is a big win for these January 6th defendants who are being politically persecuted by President Biden and the Biden Justice Department. President Biden and his Justice Department maliciously misinterpreted a post-Enron obstruction of justice statute meant to go after corporate fraud that they used to they politicized it and weaponized it to go after Trump and his supporters. And so the Biden Justice Department got smacked down by the Supreme Court for this egregious abuse of power, these malicious prosecutions of these January 6th defendants. We also had a third case where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, this wacky Ninth Circuit, said that it's cruel and unusual punishment for state and local governments to outlaw homeless camps in public parks. So they want to say it's cruel and unusual to let parks get overrun by tents and needles and drugs and garbage and filth instead of kids and families. The Supreme Court reversed that 6-3. The only thing that was shocking about that 6-3 ruling is the three left-wing Supreme Court justices are that crazy that they think that it violates the Constitution to clean out public parks from this garbage.
Mike, that was a really thorough analysis. Number one, I hope everyone understands, these landmark decisions are thanks to Donald Trump. Donald Trump defeating Hillary Clinton in 2016 and doing the work and standing by these nominees, very, very important. I want to get into the Amy Coney Barrett versus Ketanji Brown Jackson because we're seeing some shit. Amy Coney Barrett is quickly becoming a lib on the court, and that has been a buried lead. But first, Mike Davis, I want to zero in on the Chevron decision. Does this now mean that the hundreds of thousands of federal code that has been ushered by the regulatory agencies the last couple of decades is now invalidated? What are the consequences of this?
No, this is going forward. The Chief Justice made it very clear in this Chevron decision that they're going to respect what they call stare decisis or precedent on this statute because they decided this under the Administrative Procedures Act. And they said that the Administrative Procedures Act requires judges and not bureaucrats to adjudicate cases and controversies. That does not mean that 40 years of Chevron bogus decision making's out the door. It should be. Justice Gorsuch and Thomas would throw it out the door because if a court gets it wrong, stare decisis or precedent doesn't give them cover to keep getting it wrong when they got it wrong. Their job is to get it right. We're not the English common law in our federal system where the judges write the laws, and so you have to rely on the laws that judges write as the law of the land. We don't have a federal common law system like that, so why should we follow precedent that is wrong, right? And so, so that it's going to be, this is going to be litigated through the lower courts for the next many years. But besides that point, this is a monumental decision, and this is going to start to devolve power out of the executive branch, devolve power out of the federal government back to the states and to the people where it belongs, as confirmed by the 10th Amendment to the Constitution.
So on this really important news day, I hope everyone understands, talking about the debate is really important. This Supreme Court stuff is so critical. Mike Davis, now, secondly, the January 6th, does that now invalidate or cancel out some of these convictions for the January 6th defendants? And what does that look like for these people whose lives have been ruined? Mike Davis.
Yeah, so the Biden Justice Department maliciously contorted, selectively prosecuted, politicized, and weaponized this post-Enron statute to go after Trump and his supporters, while they let BLM and Antifa and Hamas and abortion industry activists and trans terrorists cause a hell of a lot more death and destruction across our country than what happened on January 6th. And they're putting people in prison for 10 or more years. One of these guys got 22 years in prison. Now, there's a difference between the people who showed up on January 6th. Even if you think that they're wrong, even if you think that they're crazy, they have an absolute First Amendment right to protest government. Then there are people who trespassed, and they could be charged with trespass. And then there are people who were violent, and they could be charged with violence. But to make up criminal statutes to go after your political enemies is unacceptable. What's going to happen with this is you're going to see these criminal convictions vacated. Thank you. These January 6th criminal convictions will be, many of them will be vacated. And then the government, the Biden Justice Department, is going to have to figure out if they're going to come up with another legal theory or if they're going to rely on the other charges that they got them on. But what needs to happen? I think the American people see that this was political persecution by Biden and his Justice Department to go after Trump and his supporters. And on day one, President Trump needs to come in and give broad pardons to almost all of these January 6th defendants, and the people who are violent, maybe you can reduce their sentence. But what the Biden Justice Department has done here by politicizing and weaponizing our justice system, this is political persecution. This is selective prosecution. And frankly, the people who did this should face severe legal, political, and financial consequences.
So help me understand now, Mike Davis, the Amy Coney Barrett trajectory. Why is she voting like a liberal more and more often? What's going on with her?
I would say this on the substance. She's not a liberal. She's a law professor, and she's a rattled law professor. And sometimes law professors think that they're the smartest people in the room, and oftentimes they lack common sense. And I think that's what's going on here is, she wants to be the hand raiser in class and show everyone in the classroom how smart she is. And that might be cute. That might work if you're at Notre Dame Law School, but it doesn't work on the Supreme Court of the United States. I would say that Justice Amy Coney Barrett should get her law professor head out of her ass.
So moving forward, Mike, can we just understand the political implications that if Donald Trump were to win another term, God willing, then we can have more of these major Supreme Court decisions in the future. And the Supreme Court, remember, is a lagging indicator of elections of the past. It is not a leading indicator. So you are now seeing the fruit of the 2016 election. It's an 8 to 10 year lagging indicator. Mike Davis, talk about how important it is to have positive individuals on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, thankfully, last night with President Biden having diarrhea in his diaper on the stage, it looks like President Trump has a pretty clear path back to the White House, which is great because guess what? The next president of the United States could pick 2, maybe 3 Supreme Court justices. And do you want President Trump or President Biden replacing Justice Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court? Do you want a justice like Amul Thapar, who's an all-star down in Kentucky, or do you want a DC Obama judge radical like Tanya Chutkan? The stakes could not be higher for this election for the Supreme Court, because as you saw with these opinions coming out of the Supreme Court, these could be much different opinions if Trump did not win the White House back in 2016 and transform the left of center court to the Clarence Thomas Supreme Court. We would still be wearing COVID masks, and kids would still be doing exactly Zoom classes, locked out of schools.
No, that's right. So Mike Davis,
these elections matter. Judges matter.
Sorry, we have a delay here. Mike Davis, 30 seconds. When can we expect a presidential immunity decision?
The presidential immunity decision will come out on Monday. That's the last day that the court is issuing opinions, and the Chief Justice said that that's the last day, and so it has to come out on Monday.
Get ready. It is a busy news week here.